Hey everyone, this is Lyndon here, really excited for this motion array tutorial. So in this episode, we're going to create this really cool flame effect. It's pretty realistic, but it's also got this nice motion graphics feel to it. So hopefully we share the opinion this is a pretty cool effect. So throughout this tutorial, we should be covering a lot of knowledge, tricks, and techniques that should make this a really nice learning experience. But also, hopefully this will be a good opportunity just to ignite some really cool ideas to go alongside this one. So now that we're all excited and ready to learn, ready to do something awesome, let's go ahead and start this tutorial. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is drag our logo into a new composition. Maybe you have a logo of your own that you'd like to apply this fire effect to. It's really cool. What we're going to do is scale this down. So we'll hit S to open the scale parameter. We'll turn this down to about 20. Go ahead and move this down, so hold shift so it only moves vertically. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new solid. So we'll make this white. I'll just call this something like fire mass. So what I'm going to do now is find the ellipse tool and we'll double click on it. Now this solid is a perfect square, so it's going to create a perfect circle. Then what we'll do is double click on this mask and we'll hold control and shift and we'll scale this down. So we'll make it about the same size as the logo. Hold shift, move this down. We can even turn off the visibility of the layer so we can properly transform this sphere. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. So we'll add a little bit of margin around the edges. And then what we'll do is grab this top point here and then we'll hold shift and move it upward, so just like this. So this is going to be the fire kind of burning off of the logo. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense so far. So one thing to keep in mind when you're creating this fire effect is not to feather anything out too much, because if you actually look at realistic fire, everything's pretty sharp. There's not much like grayscale in fire. It's all pretty black or white. So we're gonna add a little bit of feather just to make it look natural, but not too much. So we'll do like 4 pixels of feather. Now what we want to do, see, we want a little bit more feather here at the top, but a little less at the bottom. So we're going to do something pretty cool. And what we're going to do is create a blur map. So this is pretty useful. You may find yourself using this later on in the future. So we're going to create a new solid and we'll call this blur map. And I'll grab the rectangular mask tool and we'll mask out like the top half here and we'll add a lot of feather. Just like that. And then we'll add a solid composite effect so it fills in the transparency with a color like black. So now we need to pre-compose this blur map. So pre-compose, blur map, move all attributes, okay. So there's our blur map. So now we can add this really cool effect called compound blur. We'll apply this directly to the fire mass. And the cool thing about compound blur is we're able to choose a blur layer. So it's not like fast blur where you just blur the whole screen. We can actually choose a blur layer or blur map that defines how blurry each section of the screen needs to be. So up here it's going to be more blurry because the blur map is white. Alright, so hopefully it makes sense so far. So we'll choose for the blur layer, we'll choose blur map. Aha, you can see what it did. So up here where there's white, it blurred more, and down where it's darker, it didn't blur as much. So that's really cool. So we don't want to add that much blur, so we'll turn this down to about 12. And also just double click on the compound blur effect, go to the compositing options, and turn this down to about 75. There we go. So that just helps the look of our flame so far, but also this introduces you to blur maps and how you can use them. And also know that you're not limited to the geometry of this blur map. You can create whatever you want, and this compound blur effect is going to follow your blur map. So that's really cool. So if we're going to finish this tutorial in a decent time, we need to go ahead and move on. So the next thing we're going to do is kind of add some wiggle to this flame effect. So we need to create a displacement map, and that's how we're going to make this flame kind of wiggle around. We're going to create a new solid. We'll call this wiggle map, whatever, doesn't matter. And we'll apply fractal noise. So fractal noise is a nice way to add kind of random displacement. This should make sense a little bit later on. So we'll turn the scale up to maybe about 800, something pretty large. And we'll turn the complexity down to about 2. So you can see here we got these just kind of black and white shaded areas. This is going to work really good for just kind of wiggling the flame around, right? So we need to animate this upward, right? Because as the flame burns upward, it needs to have an upward motion to this displacement map. So we're going to do this with an expression. And pay close attention because we're going to be using the same expression throughout the rest of the tutorial. So hold alternate, click the stopwatch, and we'll type this expression. So there's 2 values in a position parameter. There's the X value and the Y value. So we're going to create an array, right? So we do square brackets and we put a comma. So the left side of the comma defines the first value, and the right side of the comma defines the second value. So for the horizontal motion, we just want to do 0. There's no horizontal motion. And on the right side of the comma, we want it to change. We want it to move. So we'll type in time because we want this value to increase with time. But see, the value of time only increases 1 unit per second. That's pretty slow relative to the speed we want this fractal noise to move upward. So we need to multiply time by some value. So we'll create a standard for how fast this effect is going to move, and we'll do about 1500, right? So there we go, there's our expression so far, but it's moving downward because it starts up here from the corner and moves towards the composition as the value grows. So we'll just multiply this by a negative value, so negative 1500, so that'll move upward. There we go. So now let's pre-compose this map. So layer, pre-compose, move all attributes, okay. So let's go ahead and turn this off. Let's create a new adjustment layer. We'll apply the displacement map to the adjustment layer. Yeah, we'll go over here to the effects and presets and apply displacement map. And for the layer of this displacement map, we'll choose wiggle map, the one we just created. And what we can do is actually displace this horizontally and vertically, just like that. Okay, so you can see it's going to wiggle our effect around. So it's definitely wiggling the effect around, but not exactly in the way that we want. So what we want is for the top to displace a lot, but the bottom needs to stay pretty stationary because the object that's burning off isn't moving much. So we gotta think of a way to do this. Well, to achieve this, we need to understand how displacement maps work, right? So in displacement maps, dark areas displace in one direction, bright areas displace in another direction, but since it's like mathematically speaking, if you go between that, it's not displacing at all. So basically, where there's gray, there's no displacement. So that's what we can do. We can create a gray solid, and it's 50% gray, and we'll mask out the bottom half because we don't want the bottom half to displace. We'll add a lot of feather to this, and check that out. Our bottom no longer displaces because we have that gray solid covering the fractal noise. So hopefully you get to understand the way displacement maps work. That should make sense. So we'll just adjust this mask so that it just displaces the right amount of flame. There we go. So we have this kind of candle shape moving around here, and we can adjust these values to make it look good. Okay, looking good. We got this nice, like I said, like a birthday candle kind of look here. The next step is actually to create some real turbulent displacement. This is the cool part. So we're going to do this in the same way. We're going to create a displacement map and use a displacement map effect to create the distortion. Now some of you may be thinking about turbulent displace, but we can't use that because we can't control the amount it displaces, just like we did with this wiggle map. See, with displacement maps, we can customize the displacement map to distort certain areas. And like in this case, we want the top more displaced than the bottom. So we can really customize these displacement maps. So this is really cool. Let's go ahead and create a new solid. Call this distortion map, and we'll apply a fractal noise effect. Alright, so the way we want this displacement map to kind of look, we'll uncheck uniform scale. We want to stretch this kind of vertically. Alright, because we want to create these like vertical streams of displacement, right? Hopefully that'll make sense. We'll stretch this like 400, something kind of like that. We'll turn up the contrast kind of a lot, so something kind of like this. So the lower the contrast is, the more grayscale areas there's going to be. So we want to increase the contrast kind of a lot. So yeah, something like that. Let's add a little fast blur over this effect. Blur this out just a little bit, something like that. Repeat edge pixels. So that makes it look better, but just to get back a little bit of detail, we'll add a turbulent displace. Bring down the size to about 25, bring down the amount to about 15, turn the complexity up to about 3. There we go. Hopefully that'll help. Turn the size down. Yeah, something like that should look pretty good. Okay, that looks pretty great. Now we do need to animate this upward just like the other one. So we'll add an expression to the offset turbulence, create an array for the x value, we'll do 0, and for the y value we'll do time times negative 1500. So we'll try to do a similar expression so it animates at the same rate. We can also attach this turbulent displace offset with an expression, so we'll grab the pick whip here and just attach it to the fractal noise offset. Alright, it looks pretty good. We can also add a little bit of animation to the evolution, so we'll do time times maybe 800. That looks pretty cool. And in the same way, we do need to add that gray feathering to the bottom so that it doesn't displace the bottom like it does the top. So we'll create a gray solid and we'll mask it out on the bottom half. We'll just add a lot of feather to it. Okay, so something kind of like that. Add a lot of feather, and then we'll pre-compose the gray solid and the distortion map together. So pre-compose, move all attributes, distortion map. We'll make a new adjustment layer, and we'll apply a displacement map effect. Alright, so for the displacement layer, we'll choose the layer we just created, the distortion map. There we go. And for the vertical, we'll do 0, and we'll just increase the horizontal, just like that. So we'll see how this looks. See, this is exciting. Let's see how it looks. Ooh, that looks really nice, looking really good. So we have this nice displacement map effect, and we can just kind of choose how much we want it to displace. This is looking really nice so far. maybe you guys by now are getting a good sense about how we're creating this with displacement maps, blur maps, all this stuff. So now this effect is definitely missing a few key details. It's not fading out right. The fire's not dying out here at the top correctly. It's just instantly getting cut off. Doesn't look right. So that's what we're going to focus on now. Let's turn off the distortion and the wiggle, and we're gonna do this in a really clever way. What we're gonna do is create a black solid. We'll call this fade. Doesn't matter. But it doesn't really need to be a fade. The fire needs to have a nice turbulent death. You'll see what I'm talking about. So we'll grab the rectangular mask tool and just kind of mask out the top half, just like this. So like I said, it doesn't need to be a fade. So we're not gonna apply very much feather. So maybe do like 75 pixels of feather. At this point, we're going to add a turbulent displace effect to this black solid. This is going to be cool. What we're going to do is really increase the amount. So for now, do about 200, we might need to adjust that value. And then we're going to increase the complexity. So maybe you guys get what's going on here. So now what we're going to do is animate the offset turbulence of this turbulent displace effect. Pretty much the same as the other ones. For the X, we'll do 0. For the Y, we'll do time times negative 1500. And this is going to animate upwards. So we have this hopefully pretty realistic fade out of the fire here. So like in the same way, I kind of want this to be streams just like the other one. So I'll unlock the scale parameters here and increase the scale wide to about 150, maybe even 200. But since I did that, since I stretched it vertically, I'll need to turn down the speed of this offset turbulence because I stretched it twice as much vertically. So I need to divide this by 2. So we'll do 750 instead of 1500. All right, looking pretty good. So there's kind of an issue here, like it's too spread out vertically. So we'll turn the size down to about 50 and also turn the amount down a little bit, so 150. At this point we can even, since we stretched it vertically, we can turn down the feather to about 50. And yeah, looking pretty good. Let's bring this down. Perfect, just like that. So now the fire kind of dies out in a natural way at the top here. So let's go ahead and see how this looks with all our distortion. So looking much better. Now there's a little bit of strange displacement here, and how I'll fix this is just add a fast blur to the fade layer. So add a regular fast blur, just blur it out till it looks kind of natural, just like that. Okay, perfect. Yes. So the only thing this flame effect is really missing now is some texture. We need to add some texture to this flame effect. So what I'll do is create a new solid, and we'll call this texture. And we're getting pretty close to finishing this effect. So hopefully you guys are still excited about all these different unique techniques we're applying to this effect. So we'll type in Fractal Noise, and we're going to use Fractal Noise again to create the texture of this flame. So I'll go to the transform settings, and we'll uncheck uniform scale. And like I said before, we want to create like these vertical streams. I'll turn the height to about 800, and the scale width can come down to about 60. Alright, so something kind of like that. Now I'd like to add a fast blur effect, so just a regular fast blur. And I want to do this instead of messing with the complexity, because honestly the complexity kind of messes up the structure of the fractal noise a lot. So I like to add a fast blur instead of messing with the complexity. So we'll just do a little bit of fast blur here, not much. And just kind of mess with the scale width here, something kind of like that. And now to make it look less streamy and more turbulent, we'll add a turbulent displace effect. So this is going to help it look more like fire. So we'll go to the complexity here, turn it up to about 2 or 3. We'll bring the size down to about 25, and the amount come down a decent bit. So yeah, we just add a little bit of turbulence here to make it look natural. Now we also need to animate this, so we'll add an expression to the offset, add square brackets at a comma. Left side we'll do 0, on the right side we'll do time times negative 1500. And we'll also attach the turbulent displace offset to the fractal noise turbulent offset. There we go, we have a nice fire texture. Now how do we apply this texture to our other flame effect? Well, what we'll do is go to the texture and we'll do multiply. Well, it doesn't work because there's transparency. So what we have to do is get rid of the transparency by creating an adjustment layer and add a solid composite effect to this adjustment layer. So we'll apply a solid composite to this adjustment layer, and we'll fill the transparency in with black. So there we go. Now the multiply blending mode is working since we don't have transparency anymore. Alright, let's make a few adjustments to this texture now that we can kind of see it on our fire effect. We should increase the contrast and also maybe bring up the brightness a little. Alright, so we want it to be pretty sharp black and white, not many grayscale areas. Maybe you kind of get what I'm going for here. Alright, that looks really sweet. And what I'll do now is actually duplicate this texture effect and just make a few adjustments. On this one I want to make less contrast but also more brightness. Something kind of more like this. And for the transform, I'll bring down the height, maybe something more like 400 or 500. And just make it maybe an adjustment to the offset turbulence. So go down here to the expression and maybe do, I don't know, 1300. Just add, so it adds a little variation. Okay, let's go ahead and blend this in with the rest of the effect. So before, after, just adds a little more detail. It's really cool. Alright, so let's not forget about our logo. I mean, we created this the right circular shape for the logo, but we haven't really dealt with the logo much. So let's go ahead and think about how we're going to do this logo. So this logo has transparency in the center, and I want to fill this in with black. So to fix this, I'll add a solid composite effect. Fill this in with a black color. And we only want this solid composite effect to fill in the center here, so we'll grab the ellipse tool, double click on it, and we'll apply the solid composite effect to this elliptical mask. So we'll go down here to the compositing options, hit the plus, and we'll just turn down the expansion of this mask. So yeah, it's something like that. So basically we need to cut out the part of the flame where the logo is. So I'll add a fill effect to the logo. We'll make this black. I also add a little fast blur. We just blur this out a little bit. Alright, so at this point what we need to do is add a gradient effect to the logo. And we'll choose a radial ramp. Maybe place it about right there, something kind of like that. And now let's add a curves effect. So the reason why I'm adding a curves effect is because it's too like sharp or pointy here. I'm just kind of bring down the brightness so it kind of smooths things out. So maybe this is making a little bit of sense so far. Yeah, looking really good. Now another thing I like to do is add a little stream of fire kind of coming down on the effect to make it look like it's kind of consuming or burning around the logo or whatever object you're burning. So I'll go to the logo, draw this kind of mask here, and it's not going to work because we have all these solid composite effects and fills. But what I'll do, I'm going to do something pretty savage. I'll actually add a fill effect and turn the opacity all the way down just like that, and I'll double click on the fill effect, go to the compositing options, and hit that second mask. So there we go. Doesn't matter what effects are going on up here, we have this fill effect working as kind of like a mask. So that's a really useful technique. Let's add a little bit of feather to that mask, a decent bit of feather like that. And I'll drag this logo just above the fire mask, just like that. Okay, maybe I'll add a little more feather to that triangle thing there. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Okay, looking really cool. So let's think about how we're gonna apply this logo to this effect. Now we got it cut out and everything. We got the right, spot cut out. And we got the structure of the flame looking right. Here's how we're gonna do this. We're gonna do something pretty awesome. So pay attention to this part. What we'll do is go up here to our project window, and this is our main composition. So we'll call this flame. Then we'll duplicate flame, and we'll call this logo. So let's go in here into this logo composition. And we'll start turning certain layers off. So we'll turn these texture layers off. We'll turn this fire mask layer off. And we'll just leave the distortion effects on. Turn this fade off. Yeah, all that stuff. So we just left the logo and the distortion effects. Now let's go up here to the logo and turn off all these layers that are messing up the logo. So we'll turn off the curves, gradient ramp, all that stuff, fill. There we go. They have just the logo left. So there's our logo, and I probably actually want to darken the logo, just so yeah, something kind of like this. Then let's go back to our project window, and we'll drag the logo composition and flame composition, grab them both and drag them into a new composition. Hit OK. There we go. We'll drag the flame above the logo and do a screen blending mode. Boom, just like that. Maybe that makes sense. So we need to scale up the logo just a little bit so we don't have these kind of dark edges here. We'll do 20. There we go, looking really, really nice. Really, really nice. Just like that. So now, some of you may not like how it's kind of distorting the logo here. And we can easily fix this. Let's just go into the either one, logo or flame composition. And then what we'll do is create a new gray solid. So make this 50% bright. Hit OK. And we'll double click on the elliptical mask tool. Scale it down. Drag it down. And then just really feather it out. Just like that. So we'll hit Control X, we'll cut this or copy it, and we'll go into the distortion map, hit Control V. So that's going to help the distortion not to exist where the logo is, so it doesn't distort a logo so much. And we can also paste a copy of this into the wiggle map. So hit Control V, just like that. So now it's not going to wiggle our logo too much. Now's the fun part. We pretty much finished all the geometry of the fire, all those different effects, but now it's for the fun part. We're just going to add the color and glow to this flame. So yeah, definitely the fun part. What we'll do is add a solid composite. It's always a good idea to do that just to be sure there's no transparency before you start the effect. So we'll just make this pure black. Hit OK, and let's go ahead and add a curves effect. So we'll add a little bit of color to this from the start. So we'll go to the reds, just kind of bring the red up a little bit, turn the blue down, just kind of leaving some of the greens in there. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So it's always a good idea to actually add unsharp mask so that we kind of get rid of some of those soft gray colors and make it look more like a bright, sharp flame. Turn the radius up to about 30 and the amount to 75. Yeah, it looks really good. If the colors look good, let's go ahead and add our first glow effect. And so most of the color actually needs to be in the glow. There doesn't need to be much color in the curves here, otherwise it's going to look too vibrant, too fake. So we're going to add a lot of color in the glow rather than the flame itself. Let's go to the glow threshold, turn this down to about 25. The glow radius can be about 75. Turn the glow operation to screen. Let's add our own custom colors. So we'll go to colors A and B, and for the color looping we'll do A is greater than B. Let's go to the color B and make this kind of orangish color, and the color A needs to be a little brighter, more yellow. Kind of like that. Looks good. Let's go ahead and duplicate this glow, and we'll add more of a broad, expanding glow. So maybe, let's say 350, 400, something like that. Yeah, looks pretty good. Looks pretty sweet. I'll actually add one more glow, and this will kind of be a glow to kind of complement the highlights. So we'll turn the glow threshold all the way up to 90, so it only gets those highlights. Turn the radius up to about 35. And the operation can be screen. Turn the intensity down to about 0.5. So yeah, something to kind of blend those highlights in a little better. Woo, that's looking good. Yeah, the color and glow always really helps the intensity or brightness of the effect. So wow, this turned out really nice. I'm really satisfied with how this turned out. Really bright, intense, turbulent, nice, dynamic motion graphic. Wow, that's a lot of adjectives. Fire simulation, really cool. Man, so this has definitely been pretty fun going over all these ideas and being creative with this effect. Going through a good tutorial can definitely be a really nice, productive experience. You guys be sure to check out all the other tutorials here on the Motion Array website. Oh, and the templates are really awesome as well. Even if you are a pretty talented, experienced artist, templates are a really good way to jumpstart your creativity and save you a lot of time. So yeah, be sure to browse the templates at motionarray.com. Anyway, that is all for this tutorial. It's been really fun. My name is Lyndon, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.